In this video, we're going to be talking about shapes, sizes, and distance. These three things are really important to understand lighting. And you have different types of shapes out there. You know, you got circular lights, you got squarish lights, you got octagonal lights, you got long lights, like oblong ones, yeah. You got ring lights, for example, used very often in macro photography. So you have different shapes of lights. And we can kind of replicate them in Blender. And I'm going to show you a very cool trick. So we are in cycles here, and we're going to go to shade editor, and we're gonna go to world and lower this down to 0.05. Okay, so it's really low light. Yeah, let's maybe make it a bit brighter. Okay, it's a bit too dark. Cool. So we got this set up, and we're gonna add a light now. Okay, so Shift A and add the light. I'm gonna add the area light first. Okay. Now, by default, you can see that this light is extremely diffuse, and also there's no shape to it, right? You don't know really where this light is coming from. It's just very, very unrealistic, to be honest, okay? So we can define the shape of this light a little bit with new settings in Blender, and you can use, for example, this beam shape. You can reduce the spread from 180 degrees to something a little bit more tucked in, and the closer I'm going to be collapsing it, the closer we're going to be getting to the actual shape of this light. So now I can, change the shape of this one, and it will follow, the beam of light will follow the shape of the light, okay? So you could use this feature here to create some interesting effects, okay? For instance, you could create like a series of strip lights here. Create a very narrow beam of light here, like this, and collapse it closer here. And then, duplicate it. So Alt D, X or Y, and then Shift R. And you can create this kind of effect, for example, right? Which is pretty cool. And then, because I didn't Shift D that, but Alt D it, I can adjust one of them, and the other one, the others will follow, okay? So this would be one way of creating, kind of an interesting shape of lights with Blender. Another way of doing this would be to adding IES light, and we've been talking about it in a previous video. So you could go here to use nodes, and by the way, you need to be in cycles. This will not work in Eevee. And go here to strength, and you can plug in a texture called IES texture. Now you can get these textures from internet. Just click on external and go to your folder when you download them. Just Google for IES textures. They are textures with a .ies extension. Right? Let's grab this narrow bright. Now there are a few things you need to know about this. First of all, the power you have set in here will stack with this strength. So what you want to do is dial it down to something, very small, minimal. So the lower the value here, the less effect it will have on the IES texture itself. You can bump the strength here manually if you want to. So if you want this light to be stronger, just do it in here. And also you can change color. So go here and add black body, and you can change it to whatever you want. Let's say, 550 Kelvin. That's a very natural kind of a, daylight looking bulb. Now these lights will follow shapes of real life lights, and they'll have the shapes, the strength, the features, etc. But you can change color, and you can bump the strength a little bit here. Another way of doing this would be to add a texture to light. Okay, you can do it too in Blender. So watch this. So I went in Photoshop and I created this kind of an image, which is very easy because you can do it with, I'll show you, right? So grab a layer here, and you can fill it with black. Then you go to shapes here, okay, and you grab this polygonal shape, right? You draw it here with Shift. So let me just grab this polygonal tool. There we go. Hold Shift and draw it in here. And then what you can do is you can actually even bevel it if you want to, okay, here. It reminds me of Fusion 360 or Moi beveling. And then, you got this kind of a shape here going on. Control T that to move it, right? You can move it in here. And, and apply it. Let's just remove these bevels. Let's make it quite sharp, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to right click that, and we're going to click on make selection, right? And okay, and we're going to fill that with white. Let's just create a new layer here and fill it with white, right? And you simply save it as a PNG, all right? It's important PNG. Then go to Shade Editor here. Go to Object, click on Use Nodes, Shift A and add Image Texture, right? And then add Geometry node, okay? You plug this texture here, okay? And you plug the parametric to vector. Then all you need to do is load the texture here, okay? So you go to your, wherever you have this texture saved, and you plug it in. Then what you do is you'll lower this spread, and you see here you got yourself a light of a very specific shape. And you can also adjust it here if you want to, right? So you can change the spread, you can change the strength, you can change the color, you can change whatever you want, right? So there's another way of creating specific shapes of lights, and you can project any type of stuff through this texture. You can also experiment with the alpha connection here if you want to, okay? Now, shape of light is quite important because they will cast reflections on your objects, especially when the object is really glossy, right? So if you want to avoid that, if you want to remove these reflections from being cast by lights, what you need to do is go to a light, click on it, go to this tab, go to visibility, scroll down and turn off this glossy. This will remove the reflection from your surface, right? But if you, for example, look at portraiture in photography, sometimes you may want to keep these reflections. Like, for example, in photography, we have catch lights, and they're really important. And they will, eyes will reflect exactly the source of light. So I was shooting this with a honeycomb gridded octagonal light, and you can clearly see that there is a softbox here being reflected in our eyes. And that's actually something you want to keep, because these catch lights are going to add a lot of fire to eyes. They're going to lit them on fire, set them alive, right? Whereas in this case, you may want to avoid it, so simply turn it off. Now, the shape of the light will determine also the way the light falls. So for instance, with a cone, if I'm going to go here, a cone is a very sort of a focus light, right? Because it will shine in a specific direction, okay? You can either set the light here by dragging this dot or pressing Shift T and moving your mouse, okay? So this light you can see clearly has a direction, whereas, for example, the point light is going to be an omnidirectional light, meaning the light is being cast in every direction around the lamp, okay? So, again, different lights have different features, and you can use them in different situations. So for example, if you want to go for a more focused light, you want to use a cone light or maybe even area light. If you want to use omnidirectional light, you want to use, point light. Now there's an essential rule in photography and basically in physics, and it's called inverse square law. And it tells you how light falls off. There is something called light fall off, and it's not important. It's crucial to understand how it works if you really want to get good with lighting. So let me explain you on a simple example here. So I'm going to show you a graph from Wikipedia, right? And this graph shows how the inverse square law works. If I were to give you a definition of this from Wikipedia, it's going to make your head spin, because it says, in science, an inverse square law is any scientific law stating that a specific physical quantity is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source of that physical quantity. Head exploded, right? In simple words, yeah? If the distance between the object and the light source is doubled, so if the source here is S and my object is R, if I'm going to move it from R to 2R, which means I'm going to move it, let's say, from 1 meter away from the light to 2 meters away, so I'm going to double the distance, the power of the light will decrease 4 times, which is why it's inverse square law. If you're going to triple the distance, the light power will decrease 9 times. So you're gonna get only 1/9 of the power of the light. So if you're gonna move the light, just a little bit, the power of the light is going to decrease dramatically. Now Blender is not very accurate with this, but if you're gonna use, for example, add-ons like Photographer, they have lights built in, I believe, that will actually react very realistically. So you might want to use some external add-ons for that, okay? I want to show you a very interesting example of a portrait shot with a flash, and you will never be able to tell that this was shot with a flash. Now the way this is set up is that she's facing me, Behind her, there is a setting sun, which is why I have this beautiful rim light around the hair. And literally just outside the camera view, there is a massive softbox. Okay, I mean huge. It's like a meter tall. And the reason why this shot is so soft is because the light is so close and it's huge and it sort of envelops her. Remember we talked about an overcast sky being a massive source of light, and it sort of wraps around this cube and the ray lights come from everywhere. This is why the shadows are so soft. That's a similar principle, okay? So how it works in practice, right, is that if I have a light here, let me just grab a light here, okay? And I'm gonna grab an area light and drop it in here, okay? Like this, right? And I'm gonna make it quite big and I'm gonna make it quite strong, okay? The closer the light is to the subject, the larger proportionally to the subject it's going to appear, because I'm moving it closer, right? And the stronger it's gonna be. So the closer you are, the larger the surface of the light, the less light you need to use to light the object properly. The further away you're gonna get from your subject, the smaller this light source will become, and the more light you need to pump in to properly light the object, okay? See what I mean? Look at the shadows here. They're becoming harder and harder. If I'm gonna move my light closer and I'm going to reduce the amount of light, right? Because I don't need that much light anymore, the shadow's gonna become softer because the light source itself becomes larger, okay? It's enveloping the whole cube, right? So I'm gonna exaggerate this, alright? So watch this. Look at the shadow, how soft it is. I'm gonna move it further away and I'm gonna pump the light to match it. Watch the shadow, see what I mean? Because now the light source is further away and it starts becoming like a sun on the sky, which is why sun has a hard light, okay? If I change it to 8000, you know, look at the shadow, see what I mean? That's a sun basically, because again, the size of the light source is relatively smaller when you move it further. When I'm gonna move it closer and drop this to, you know, 300, right? My shadow is gonna be almost non-existent because the light envelops the whole object. So you can change the quality of lighting by moving the light about and changing its power without changing the size or shape, okay? So remember, this is an important rule and you really need to understand how it works, because that is the key to understanding how to set your light in a scene. Inverse square law is the most important rule in terms of understanding how light works, okay? So this video should give you a good understanding of, you know, shapes, size, distance of light, and why these three things are important. And we're gonna be using this knowledge later on when we're gonna be, you know, working some more practical examples, and also you will notice that in the practical part of this tutorial when we're gonna be designing the environment.